The house was quiet when she left, the kind of quiet that settles after trust has been taken for granted. I didn't lock the fridge that morning. I didn't think I needed to. By the time she opened it again, the silence broke in a way I couldn't undo. I'm a retired woman living alone in the house I raised my children in, a place that still smells faintly of old soap and boiled tea. My pension arrives once a month, modest but carefully planned, stretched across groceries, electricity, and quiet routines. My daughter comes and goes these days, always in a hurry, always with reasons. I thought family meant understanding. The kettle clicked off by itself. Steam lifted, then vanished. I didn't move right away. The morning light was thin, barely reaching the table, slipping across the surface like it wasn't sure it was welcome. The house was awake before me, settling into its usual sounds, the refrigerator humming, a bird testing its voice outside, the clock above the doorway counting seconds I wasn't ready to spend. I sat down with my phone and opened the banking app the way I always did. Slowly, carefully, as if rushing might make something break. The number felt wrong before I even understood why. I stared at it. Then I blinked. Then I leaned closer, as if distance was the problem. I did the math anyway. Once, then again. I whispered the numbers under my breath, the way I used to help my daughter with homework when she was small. Patient, hopeful, willing the answer to change if I gave it enough time. It didn't. The kettle had gone quiet, but I could still hear the echo of it in my head. I stayed seated long after my tea went cold, my thumb hovering over the screen. I refreshed the page, closed it, opened it again. Still wrong. I rested my palm on the table. The wood was warm from years of hands, from meals and letters and cups set down too hard. It felt steady, reliable. I wished the numbers would do the same. This pension had a shape in my life. It arrived once a month, modest and exact. I knew where every part of it went. Groceries first, electricity next. A little for emergencies I pretended wouldn't come. Nothing extra, nothing careless. There wasn't room for mistakes. I thought about calling the bank. I thought about whether I'd misremembered something. I thought about how easy it would be if this were just my fault. An hour passed without me noticing. The light shifted on the floor. The shadow of the chair stretched and thinned. My phone buzzed once, sharp in the quiet. A message from my daughter. Heading out for a short trip. Just needed a break. We'll call later. I read it twice, then a third time. The words were light, casual, the kind she used when she didn't want questions. The heart at the end felt practiced. She didn't mention money. She didn't have to. Something inside me settled, heavy and certain. Not anger, not yet, just knowing. The kind that arrives without noise, without permission. I turned the phone face down on the table. I thought about the way she'd been moving lately, coming and going faster than before, her visits shorter, her hugs distracted. I remembered the sound of my purse zipper last week, how it hadn't sat right with me then. I remembered dismissing the feeling because it was easier. Explanations had replaced permissions somewhere along the way. I couldn't pinpoint when. Maybe it happened slowly. Maybe I helped it happen by not saying anything. I stood up and carried my tea to the sink. Poured it out. The steam rose again, brief and quiet, like a breath that didn't want to be noticed. The house felt different now. Not hostile. Just aware. I moved through it carefully, my slippers brushing the floor. The hallway mirror caught me by surprise. I looked older than I felt. Or maybe I felt exactly as old as I looked, and that was the problem. I sat back down at the table. When my daughter was younger, she used to ask before borrowing anything, even coins, even hairpins. She'd stand there, hands behind her back, waiting. I used to smile and tell her she didn't have to ask, that it was hers too. I wondered if that was where I went wrong. The phone stayed silent after that. No follow-up, no call, just the quiet acknowledgement of her absence, already underway. I opened the banking app again, not because I expected it to change, but because I needed to look at it once more, the way you touch a sore place just to confirm it's still there, still wrong. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't even feel surprised anymore. I felt tired, the kind of tired that comes from realizing you've been generous in a world that mistakes silence for consent. I made a list in my head of what this missing amount meant. Fewer groceries this month, a delay on the electric bill, no room for error. Outside, a car passed slowly. Somewhere down the street, a door closed. Life continued, indifferent to the way something small had shifted inside my chest. I picked up my phone again and typed a message, then erased it, typed another, erased that too. There was nothing I could say yet that wouldn't sound like accusation. And accusation wasn't what I wanted. I wanted acknowledgement. I wanted her to remember the difference between asking and taking. I placed the phone back on the table, face down again. The screen reflected the ceiling light faintly, like an eye that had closed. The clock ticked. I sat there until the light reached the edge of the room, until the morning felt spent. Somewhere my daughter was already on her way, bags packed, plans made, money spent. And here I was, still at the table. I wondered how long this had been happening without me noticing. How many times I'd told myself it was easier not to ask questions. How many small withdrawals, emotional, financial, unspoken, I'd allowed because love makes you patient. The house didn't answer. It never does. But it listened. And so did I. The door didn't slam when she left. It never does. It closed softly, the latch settling into place with a sound so small it almost felt polite. Still, the house seemed to notice. The air shifted. The hallway stretched longer than it had before, as if the walls were unsure how to stand without her moving through them. I stayed where I was for a moment, listening. Nothing followed. No footsteps. No keys dropped and picked up again. Just the quiet hum of the refrigerator, steady and unconcerned, like it had always been. The house felt larger once she was gone, not brighter, just wider, emptier in a way that echoed. I walked through it slowly, the way you do after rearranging furniture, careful not to trip over what used to be there. My hand brushed the back of a chair as I passed. The wood was smooth, worn thin by years of leaning, by elbows and waiting. I ran my fingers along the edge of the doorframe next, feeling the small nick where her bicycle once tipped over inside the hallway. I hadn't fixed that dent. I never wanted to. The refrigerator hummed again, louder now that the rest of the house had gone quiet. I opened it without thinking. Cold air spilled out, carrying the faint smell of leftovers and something sweet I'd forgotten to throw away. Inside, everything was where I'd left it. Milk on the left, vegetables stacked neatly in the drawer, a jar of jam with the label half peeled, stubborn as ever. Nothing had changed. That was the problem. I stood there longer than necessary, one hand on the fridge door, letting the cold settle into my skin. It felt grounding, reliable. Machines don't take what they don't ask for. I closed the door gently. I realized then how carefully I'd arranged my life around small certainties. The pension arriving on the same day each month, the kettle clicking off when it was ready, the way the morning light reached the floor just past the table leg at 9 o'clock. I had built my days from things that didn't surprise me. I sat down in the living room, in the chair closest to the window. The cushion sank the same way it always had, remembering my weight better than people sometimes do. Outside, a neighbor watered their plants, the hose hissing softly. Ordinary sounds, ordinary time. I folded my hands in my lap. When she was younger, she used to sit on the floor right here, cross-legged, surrounded by toys she didn't need. She'd look up at me and ask questions she already knew the answers to, just to hear me say them. Back then, I thought certainty was something you passed down. Like eye color, like habits. I didn't realize it could be taken. The house creaked as I stood again. The floor had always done that, but today it sounded like recognition, like it remembered me walking these same paths alone before, after her father passed, when the house learned how to hold grief without collapsing. It had done it once. It could do it again. I moved room to room without purpose, just tracing the edges of things. The bookshelf, the lamp cord, the faded photograph on the wall where her smile still looked easy, unguarded. In her old bedroom, the air felt different, stiller. The bed was made too neatly, the way it looks when no one plans to sleep there. I touched the corner of the quilt, smoothing it down though it didn't need it. I wondered when she'd stopped seeing this place as a home and started seeing it as a resource. The thought arrived quietly, without accusation, just observation. I returned to the kitchen and filled the kettle again. The tap ran a second longer than usual, water splashing against metal. I liked the sound. It reminded me that some things still flowed when you asked them to. While the kettle heated, I stood at the counter and looked at my hands. The skin was thinner now, veins closer to the surface. Hands that had signed forms, counted change, paid bills on time, even when it meant saying no to myself. Hands that had trusted. The kettle clicked off. I poured the water and watched steam rise, then disappear. That too was reliable. I carried the cup back to the table and sat where the light reached the floor. The honest spot, the one that never pretended to be warmer or brighter than it was. The sunlight traced the edge of my slipper, paused, then moved on. I took a sip. It tasted the same. I thought about calling her, not to argue, not to accuse, just to ask. But the question felt heavier now that she was gone, like it might fall wrong if I set it down too quickly. What happens when even small certainties are taken? The house answered with silence. But the silence felt different than before. Less empty, more waiting. I realized then that being alone wasn't what frightened me. I'd done that before. I knew how to fill hours with routine, how to make peace with quiet. What unsettled me was the way something fundamental had shifted without my consent. The way trust had been treated like a convenience, something flexible, something to borrow without returning. I wrapped both hands around the mug and held it close. The warmth steadied me. Outside, the neighbor turned off the hose. The hiss stopped, another small ending. I breathed in, then out. The house settled around me, wood and walls adjusting to their new balance. It didn't take sides, it just held. I wondered how many other certainties I'd arranged my life around without realizing how fragile they were. How many times I'd stayed quiet to keep things smooth. The thought didn't hurt the way I expected it to. It felt clarifying. I set the mug down and listened to the refrigerator hum again, steady as ever. Not caring, not judging, just existing. The house had always been good at that. As evening crept closer, the light softened, stretching shadows across the floor. I stayed where I was, letting the quiet settle into something I could live with. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know what I would say when she called. But for the first time since the numbers stopped making sense, I felt something solid return beneath my feet. The house wasn't mine because I controlled it, it was mine because it knew me. And as the day leaned toward night, I wondered what other truths I'd been avoiding, and whether facing them now would cost me less than staying silent ever had. The kettle had already boiled once before I noticed. It clicked off softly, the sound small but certain, like it had done its job whether I was paying attention or not. Steam curled up and vanished, leaving the kitchen exactly as it was before. Unchanged, unimpressed by my drifting thoughts. I stood there a moment longer, listening. The house was awake in its quiet way. The clock on the wall ticked steadily. The refrigerator hummed like a distant road. Somewhere outside, a bird called once and then stopped, as if it had said all it needed to say. I reached for the kettle again, poured the water into a cup, and set it on the table. I didn't add sugar. I didn't stir. I just sat down and watched the steam rise and thin until it disappeared. That was when I remembered her hands. Small hands once, careful ones. She used to hold things like they mattered, like borrowing meant responsibility. When she was little, she would stand in the doorway and ask before touching anything that wasn't hers. She'd say, even when the answer was obvious. I used to be proud of that. I used to think respect, once learned, stayed put. The tea sat between my palms, untouched. The surface went still. I could see my reflection in it, faint and broken by light from the window. I remembered her asking to borrow a sweater once, one I'd had for years. She stood there waiting, fingers folded together, eyes searching my face like permission was something fragile. She returned it clean, folded, thanked me again. That version of her felt close today. Too close. Like a photograph left out in the open too long. I leaned back in my chair and let the memories come without guiding them. Old conversations replayed themselves, uneven and incomplete. Laughter from the kitchen. Arguments that ended quickly. Moments I'd brushed aside because they didn't seem important at the time. I wondered when asking became explaining, when permission turned into assumption. The tea cooled quietly. I didn't move to stop it. Outside the light shifted, clouds passed over the sun, softening the room, dulling the edges of things. The house looked older like this, more honest. I thought about the text she'd sent, casual, bright. A smiley face at the end, as if that explained everything. She hadn't mentioned the money, she hadn't needed to. I held my phone in my lap and turned it over once, screen down, like that might quiet the question pressing behind my ribs. Was this trip really spontaneous? I pictured her packing, folding clothes, zipping a suitcase carefully so it wouldn't catch. Did she hesitate at all? Did she think of me standing at the table checking numbers that no longer lined up? Or had it all been decided quietly, long before the money moved? The kettle sat cold now. I finally lifted the cup and took a sip. The tea tasted thin, flat. I swallowed anyway. There was a time she would have told me first, I was sure of that. I pushed the chair back and stood, the legs scraping softly against the floor. The sound echoed more than it should have. I carried the cup to the sink and poured the tea out without ceremony. The liquid disappeared down the drain quickly, leaving nothing behind. Some things don't leave traces. I rinsed the cup and placed it upside down on the towel, careful to line it up with the others. Order still mattered to me, even now. I moved through the house slowly, touching things without really noticing I was doing it. The edge of the counter, the back of the sofa, the door frame leading to the hallway, worn smooth where years of passing had left their mark. This house had seen her grow up, had held her secrets, her moods, her slammed doors and late-night returns. It knew her rhythms better than I did now. In her old room, I paused. The room was tidy, but it felt staged, like a space waiting to be used by someone who hadn't arrived yet. I stood near the doorway, arms folded loosely, not crossing the threshold. I remembered helping her pack for her first trip alone. How she'd waited for my answer before reaching for it. I said yes. Of course I did. The memory landed heavier than I expected. I sat on the edge of the bed and listened to the quiet settle. No music, no footsteps, just the house breathing around me. When had I stopped noticing the small shifts? When had I accepted explanations instead of questions? I thought about how carefully I'd taught her to be considerate, how I'd praised her for asking, for checking, for not assuming. And I wondered when I'd taught her, without meaning to, that I would always understand, even when I wasn't consulted. The realization didn't come with anger, just clarity. I went back downstairs as the afternoon wore on. The light returned slowly, sliding across the floor in a way I recognized. The house hadn't changed its habits, only mine. I sat again at the table, this time without the tea. My hands rested flat against the surface, feeling the cool grain beneath my palms. I thought about the next conversation we'd have, the way her voice might sound defensive before I said anything, the way she might fill the silence quickly, afraid of what it meant. I didn't know yet what I would say, but I knew I wouldn't pretend not to notice. The house creaked softly, as if agreeing. Evening approached without announcement. Shadows grew longer. The refrigerator hummed on, steady and indifferent. The clock kept ticking. I breathed in slowly, then out. I realized something then, sitting alone in the quiet. Respect doesn't vanish all at once. It fades in pieces, unnoticed, until one day you're left holding the absence of it, wondering where it went. I had been too gentle with my silence, too generous with my understanding. That didn't mean I loved her less. It meant I had been afraid of asking for my place. The thought didn't scare me anymore. As night settled in, I reached for the kettle again, filled it, and set it on the stove. The familiar motions steadied me. The click of the switch felt grounding. This time, I stayed. The kettle began to warm. The house listened. And as the water slowly came to a boil, I wondered what other truths I'd been postponing, and whether it was finally time to ask the questions I'd taught her to respect, even if the answers changed everything. I stood in front of the refrigerator longer than I needed to. The door stayed closed. The light inside never came on. I listened instead. The fridge breathed in a steady rhythm, low and mechanical, like it was alive in a way machines sometimes pretend to be. It didn't rush me. It didn't demand anything. It just kept going, the same sound it had made for years, through birthdays and arguments and ordinary mornings. My reflection stared back at me in the dull metal, softer now, older, familiar in a way I hadn't examined closely for some time. I rested my palm against the door, feeling the faint vibration beneath my skin. I wasn't hungry. I wasn't even sure why I'd come here. The house behind me was quiet, but not empty. It carried the echo of earlier hours, the scrape of a chair, the clink of a cup, the careful way footsteps avoided certain rooms. Silence had weight tonight. It pressed gently but firmly, like a hand on my shoulder reminding me I was still here. I thought about opening the fridge, then I didn't. Instead, I stood there and let the idea arrive slowly, the way truth sometimes does when it knows it won't survive being rushed. I didn't want to shout. I didn't want to accuse. I wanted to be understood. The thought surprised me with how calm it felt. All my life, I'd believed understanding came after explanations. That if you laid everything out carefully enough, people would eventually see what you meant. But lately, explanations had been everywhere and understanding had gone missing. I stepped back and leaned against the counter. The floor creaked beneath my weight, a familiar complaint. This house had always spoken in small sounds. It remembered us even when we forgot ourselves. I thought about my voice, how it had changed over the years. There was a time when it carried authority without effort, when a single word from me could quiet a room. Then later, it softened, by choice. I learned how to listen more than I spoke, learned how to leave space for others. Somewhere along the way, my quiet had been mistaken for consent. I closed my eyes. Images surfaced without asking. My daughter laughing too loudly at the table. My son explaining something carefully, like he was choosing each word from a list approved by someone else. The pause before answers. The way people looked past me now, as if my presence were a piece of furniture, necessary, but unremarkable. The refrigerator clicked softly, adjusting its temperature. I opened my eyes and realized I'd been holding my breath. There was a way to speak without raising my voice. I knew that now. It wasn't about volume. It was about timing. I moved to the table and sat down, placing both hands flat on its surface. The wood was cool, worn smooth by years of use. This table had heard everything, confessions whispered late at night, arguments that fizzled out before they caught fire, laughter that lingered even after people left the room. If I spoke here, the words would stay. I imagined the conversation I hadn't had yet. I didn't rehearse sentences, I didn't plan defenses. I only pictured myself sitting still, waiting until the room stopped moving around me. Listening first, then speaking once. That was the difference. I remembered how my daughter used to look at me when she wanted something she wasn't sure she was allowed to have. The way she'd hover nearby, pretending not to care, until finally asking. There was respect in that hesitation. Care. Where had it gone? The question didn't come with bitterness, just curiosity. I stood and finally opened the fridge. The light spilled out, sudden and bright. Inside, everything was arranged neatly, milk where it always was, leftovers labeled with dates, fruit lined up carefully. Order, preserved. I took out a bottle of water and closed the door again. The light vanished. The hum returned. I drank slowly, the coolness grounding me. This wasn't about punishment, it wasn't about control, it was about presence. I wanted them to see me again, not as an obstacle, not as an afterthought, but as someone whose voice still mattered even when it wasn't loud. I carried the bottle to the sink and set it down, untouched now. The urge to do something, to act, to fix, had faded. I didn't need to move tonight. The realization settled gently. I would speak when the moment arrived. Not sooner, not later. I walked through the living room, turning off a lamp that no longer needed to be on. The room shifted into shadow, familiar shapes softened by darkness. I paused by the doorway and looked back once, the way people do when they aren't sure if they're leaving something behind. Upstairs, the house creaked again. A reminder. A witness. I sat on the couch and folded my hands in my lap. The clock ticked louder here. Time had a way of announcing itself when you finally stopped running from it. I thought about how often I'd stayed quiet to keep the peace. How easily that label attached itself to women who asked to be considered. Peace, I realized, was not the same as silence. The thought didn't hurt, it clarified. When footsteps eventually approached, soft, hesitant, I didn't look up right away. I stayed where I was, breathing evenly, letting the moment arrive on its own terms. The room held its breath. I knew when I spoke, I wouldn't rush. I wouldn't justify. I wouldn't explain myself into smaller pieces. I would say what needed to be said once, calmly, clearly. And then I would listen, because being understood begins with allowing space, for yourself as much as for others. The clock ticked on. The refrigerator hummed in the distance. The house waited. And for the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid of what my quiet might carry when I finally let it speak. The refrigerator light came on all at once, brighter than I expected. For a moment, it felt like the only honest thing in the room. I stood there with the door open, the cold air brushing my ankles, listening to the house behind me. Nothing moved, no footsteps, no voices, just the steady hum of the machine and the quiet tick of the clock in the other room. I reached in and took out the milk first. The carton was heavier than it looked, cold against my palm. I set it on the counter gently, the way you do when you don't want to wake anyone. The sound it made was small, controlled. I paused, waiting to see if the house would react. It didn't. The fridge light stayed on, patient. Next came the leftovers, a glass container with a chipped corner. Soup I'd made earlier in the week, portioned carefully, labeled with a date I remembered writing without thinking. I lifted it out, feeling the familiar weight of routine in my hands. I placed it beside the milk, then the vegetables, wrapped neatly in paper, carrots trimmed and cleaned, greens folded inward like they were protecting themselves. I'd done that without realizing why, too, trying to make things last longer than they naturally would. One by one, I removed everything. I didn't rush. I didn't hesitate. Each item came out with its own quiet sound, the soft thud of glass, the rustle of paper, the dull tap of plastic against wood. The refrigerator began to look unfamiliar, its shelves bare in places they hadn't been bare in years. I wasn't throwing anything away. That part mattered. I carried the food to the small storage fridge in the laundry room, arranging it carefully, the same way I always did. Nothing wasted, nothing abandoned, just moved. When I returned, the kitchen felt different. The fridge door was still open. The light inside flickered slightly, unsure of its purpose now. I leaned forward and looked inside. The shelves were clean, almost too clean. The faint outline where containers used to sit was still visible, like shadows that hadn't caught up yet. I closed the door. The sound surprised me. It wasn't the solid, full thump I was used to. It was lighter, hollow, the kind of sound an empty room makes when you clap your hands once and wait for the echo. I rested my forehead against the cool surface of the door and listened as the refrigerator adjusted itself. The hum changed pitch, just slightly. It was still working, still doing what it was meant to do, but differently now. The house noticed. I stepped back and sat at the table, folding my hands together. The kitchen felt larger with less in it. Not emptier, just clearer, like a thought you finally allow yourself to finish. I remembered all the conversations that had happened in this room, how many of them had ended unfinished, how often I'd filled the silence with small tasks, washing a cup, straightening a chair, checking the fridge even when I knew exactly what was inside. Fullness had been my distraction. I'd believed that if everything stayed stocked, organized, ready, then nothing important could be missing. That care looked like preparation. That love sounded like quiet efficiency. But sitting there now, I realized how much noise fullness makes. The fridge hummed louder than before, compensating. The clock ticked with sharper edges. Even my breathing felt more noticeable, like the room was paying attention. I thought about the things I'd stored away over the years, not just food. Feelings folded neatly, labeled, pushed to the back where they wouldn't spoil anything else. I told myself I'd get to them later. Later had come. I stood again and opened the fridge once more, just to be sure. The light came on obediently. The emptiness stared back without judgment. There was room now. Room for things to be placed with intention instead of habit. I closed the door again, softer this time, testing the sound. It was still light, still hollow. I realized I didn't mind it. Emptiness wasn't accusing me. It was inviting me. I moved through the kitchen slowly, wiping the counter, though it didn't need it, straightening a towel that had already been straight. Old instincts. Comfort motions. But they felt different now, like echoes instead of commands. Somewhere in the house, a door opened and closed. Footsteps passed, careful. I didn't look up. I didn't need to. I thought about how often I'd tried to explain myself with words that were too full, how I'd added reasons on top of reasons, hoping one of them would land gently enough to be accepted. But emptiness teaches differently. It doesn't argue. It doesn't justify. It simply shows what remains when everything unnecessary is removed. I returned to the fridge one last time and placed my hand on the door. The vibration beneath my palm was steady now, adjusted, settled. The machine had learned. So had I. I understood then that I wasn't preparing for a confrontation. I wasn't building a case or practicing a speech. I was making space. For truth, for presence, for myself. When you stop filling every gap, people notice the silence. They lean into it. I turned off the kitchen light and let the room fall into shadow. The fridge hummed on, quieter now, like it had found its natural rhythm again. The house exhaled with me. I walked away without looking back. Behind me, the refrigerator held nothing but cold air and light, waiting for what would come next. And for the first time, I understood that emptiness wasn't absence, it was honesty. What it would teach next, I didn't yet know, but I could feel the lesson coming, steady and unavoidable, like footsteps approaching down a quiet hallway. The kettle boiled without ceremony that morning. No whistle, just steam rising in a thin, patient line. I stood beside it, watching the window above the sink slowly brighten. The light came in soft, filtered through dust I hadn't bothered to wipe yet. Outside, nothing had changed. Same street, same fence, same tree that leaned a little more each year but never fell. Inside, though, everything felt measured. I poured the hot water over a tea bag and waited longer than usual before removing it. The cup warmed my hands. I didn't add milk. There wasn't any in the fridge anymore. That thought came and went without drama, like a fact you've already accepted. The house was quiet in a different way now. Not empty, intentional. I sat at the table and ate toast. Plain. No butter melting into the cracks, no jam staining the plate. It tasted like effort, like restraint. I chewed slowly, listening to the clock, counting nothing in particular. Days began to stack like that. Simple meals. Eggs cooked and eaten in one sitting. Fruit bought in small amounts. Bread wrapped carefully so it wouldn't dry out before I finished it. I adjusted without complaint. Adaptation had always been one of my better skills. Each choice felt deliberate. Nothing wasted, nothing extra. By the third day, my daughter's messages began arriving regularly. Photos first. Blue water stretched wide and forgiving. Plates of food arranged beautifully, colors too bright to be accidental. Her smile appeared in the corner of one picture, half of her face cut off, laughing at something outside the frame. I studied each image longer than necessary, not out of jealousy, out of curiosity. She looked relaxed, unburdened, like someone who hadn't checked a balance or opened a fridge or wondered who would absorb the consequences of her freedom. I typed back short replies. The words were polite, correct. They didn't accuse or ask. I pressed send and placed the phone face down on the table, like it might speak out of turn if I let it. Each message felt like a test I hadn't signed up for, not of love, of patience. The afternoons were the hardest. That was when the house usually asked the most of me. Preparations, planning, filling. Now it didn't. Now it just existed, waiting. I walked through the rooms slowly, touching familiar surfaces. The arm of the sofa still held the faint impression of my elbow. The hallway mirror reflected me exactly as I was. No softer, no harsher. The fridge hummed in the background, steady and restrained. It had settled into its emptiness, like a person learning how to sleep alone again. I opened it once, just to check. Habit. The light came on, revealing space instead of things. I closed it without taking anything out. That night, another message arrived. A short video this time. Waves rolling in, sound on, laughter layered over the water. Someone else's voice in the background, too close to the microphone to be accidental. I watched it twice. I imagined her opening the fridge at home someday, reaching automatically for something that wouldn't be there. I wondered if the absence would register immediately, or if she'd stand there for a moment, confused, before understanding. How long before someone notices what's missing? The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. Dawn hadn't fully decided itself yet. I sat at the table with a bowl of oatmeal, steam rising gently, and thought about all the ways absence announces itself. Sometimes loudly, sometimes not at all. By midday, I had folded laundry that didn't need folding and wiped counters that were already clean. The motions steadied me. They gave my hands something to do while my thoughts paced. I remembered when she was younger, how she used to knock on my bedroom door even when it was open, how she'd wait for me to look up before asking anything, even small things. Permission had once been instinct, not inconvenience. Another photo came in the afternoon, a dessert this time. Layers of cream and fruit and something dark at the bottom I couldn't identify. I wondered if it had been expensive. I wondered if she'd checked the price or just ordered it without thinking. I didn't add anything else. The silence between messages stretched. I could feel it in my chest, tight but manageable, like holding a breath you know you'll eventually release. That evening I cooked rice and vegetables, ate slowly, listened to the radio until the voices blurred into background noise. The announcer spoke about weather changes, about distant places. None of it felt urgent. Later, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and thought about how carefully I'd built my life around predictability, around knowing where things were, how much was left, what would come next. Small certainties had been my anchors. Now even those felt provisional. On the fifth day, the message was different. No photo, just text. "Hey Mom, quick question." I read it once, then again. My fingers hovered over the screen, unmoving. The dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. I waited. Finally, the rest came through. Did something happen to the fridge? I set the phone down on the table and didn't answer right away. The house was very quiet then, like it knew something important had shifted. The fridge hummed, steady and unconcerned. I walked over and placed my hand on the door, feeling the faint vibration beneath my palm. Nothing was wrong with it, nothing at all. I picked up the phone and typed carefully. I paused. I didn't explain, I didn't accuse. I sent the message and watched the screen until the timestamp appeared beneath it. Delivered. I sat back in my chair and let the silence stretch. Whatever came next wouldn't be about the fridge. It would be about everything that had been taken for granted quietly, without announcement. The house seemed to lean in, listening. I realized then that patience isn't passive. It's a choice you make every day to let truth arrive on its own schedule. As I turned off the light and went to bed, I wondered what she'd see when she finally opened that fridge again. Not just the emptiness, but what it asked her to consider, and whether she'd be ready to answer. I hear the front door before I see her. The lock turns too fast, like she's done it 100 times already in her head. The door bumps the wall, not gently. Bags drag across the floor, their wheels catching on the uneven tile near the entryway. The house inhales, surprised. She calls out, already halfway inside. Her voice is light, distracted, still traveling. I'm standing at the sink, rinsing a cup that doesn't need rinsing. The water runs longer than necessary. I don't answer right away, not out of spite, out of habit. I've learned to listen first. Her footsteps move down the hallway, quick and careless. The sound of zippers, fabric shifting, a phone vibrating somewhere inside a bag. Then the fridge door opens. There's a pause, not confusion yet, just delay. Then the silence sharpens, like glass snapping clean in half. The scream comes after. It's short, not dramatic, more breath than sound, the kind that slips out when your body understands something before your mind does. I turn off the tap. The house holds still. I dry my hands slowly on a towel that's grown thin with age, each motion deliberate, almost ceremonial. I don't rush, I don't rehearse words, I just walk. She's standing in front of the open fridge, one hand still gripping the door, the other hovering uselessly in the air. Her shoulders are tense, lifted too high. She doesn't turn when she hears me. She asks, even though she already knows. I look past her into the refrigerator. Light, shelves, space. It looks exactly the way I left it. I thought something was wrong, she says. Her voice wobbles now, trying to land somewhere steady. Yes, I say. She finally turns to face me. Her eyes are wide, scanning my face for anger, for triumph, for something loud enough to fight. She doesn't find it. That unsettles her more than shouting ever could. She asks. I shrug, small, almost apologetic. Her voice rises, sharp at the edges now. Somewhere safe, I say. She laughs once, breathless, not amused. I didn't throw anything away, I say. She runs a hand through her hair, pacing once, then stopping. The fridge door stays open, spilling cold air into the room, wasting itself. I just got back, she says. I nod. You couldn't at least leave. She stops herself, swallows. The question hangs between us, heavy with other questions it doesn't dare ask. I think of the mornings I ate quietly, the careful meals, the messages I answered politely, the photos I studied without comment. I think of the pension number that didn't feel wrong because it was unfamiliar, but because it was. I needed you to notice, I say. Her eyes narrow. I gesture gently toward the fridge, toward the absence. She looks back inside it, like the answer might rearrange itself if she stares long enough. This is childish, she says finally. I don't react. I wait. You could have just said something, she adds. I meet her gaze. I did say something, I reply. She scoffs. No, I say. The word lands awkwardly in the room, too modern, too clean. She shifts her weight, suddenly uncomfortable. You're overreacting, she says. It was just money, I ask. She opens her mouth, closes it, looks away. The fridge hums, patient and unbothered. I needed it, she says finally. I nod again. She looks back at me then, really looks, for the first time since she walked in. You didn't even ask where I was going, she says, softer now. I let that sit. I didn't need to, I reply. Her shoulders slump, just slightly. I take a step closer, careful not to crowd her. Her eyes flick to the floor. Yes, I say. She waits. I don't continue. The silence grows again, but this time it's different. Not sharp, heavy, full. She closes the fridge door slowly. The seal catches with a dull thud. The kitchen warms a fraction. She asks. I point toward the pantry. She exhales. I meet her eyes. I tried. That lands harder than I expect. I see it in the way her jaw tightens, the way she blinks too quickly. I didn't know, she says. I know, I answer. We stand there, two women who share a face in different decades, surrounded by things we once agreed belonged to both of us. I didn't mean to hurt you, she says quietly. I believe that, I reply. She nods slowly, like someone learning a new word in a language she thought she already spoke. I consider that. Yes, I say. She lets out a breath she's been holding since the scream. I turn back toward the sink, pick up the towel, fold it once, then again. Behind me, she stands still, waiting, not reaching, not assuming. The house seems to relax around us, just a little. As I pour us both a glass of water, I think about the sound she made when she opened the fridge, about how absence can speak louder than accusation. Sometimes the scream isn't anger at all. Sometimes it's the sound of realization finally finding its voice. I don't follow her right away. I hear her footsteps leave the kitchen, fast and uneven, like she's lost her balance but refuses to admit it. A bag hits the arm of the couch in the living room. Something metal clinks, keys maybe. The house carries the sound longer than it should. I stay where I am. I lower myself into the chair near the window, the one that catches the afternoon light just right. The cushion sighs when I sit, like it recognizes me. Outside, a sparrow hops along the fence, stopping every few seconds as if reconsidering its route. I breathe. The living room fills with her presence before she does. Heat, movement, restlessness. She demands, appearing in the doorway. Her voice is sharp now, pitched higher than it was in the kitchen. I don't look up right away. I smooth the crease in my skirt. I notice a loose thread near the hem. I make a note to fix it later, even though I probably won't. I'm asking you something, she says. I lift my eyes then. Meet hers. She's standing in the middle of the room, arms crossed tight across her chest, like she's holding herself together. Her face is flushed. Her mouth is ready for a fight. I don't give her one. I move some things, I say. It's the truth, I reply. She throws her hands up. You emptied the fridge. You hid my food. I nod once. Her laugh is short, bitter. I tilt my head slightly. She paces once, then stops in front of me. Too close. I don't lean back. You had no right, she says. That food, that's mine. I fold my hands in my lap. Her mouth opens, closes. The room shifts, she says. I speak slowly, carefully. The words land between us, solid and plain. No heat, no accusation wrapped in them, just comparison. She blinks. Once, twice. That's not the same thing, she says, but her voice has changed. Less sharp, less certain. I ask. She looks away toward the bookshelf, the family photos, the clock that's been ticking too loudly all afternoon. Her jaw tightens. You're exaggerating, she says. I wait. She glances at me again, expecting interruption. None comes. She asks. I tell her. The color drains from her face, slowly, like a tide pulling back. That's not... She stops, swallows. I nod. She sinks onto the edge of the couch, suddenly tired. The cushions dip under her weight, unfamiliar with her sitting still. I needed it, she says quietly. Things were expensive. I didn't think... I know, I say. She looks at me then, really looks. For the first time since she came home, she isn't talking over me, isn't preparing her next defense. She's listening. I wasn't trying to hurt you, she says. I believe that, I reply. The room feels smaller now, not tight, intimate. She rubs her palms together, a nervous habit from childhood. I remember watching her do that before school presentations, before apologies she wasn't sure she could make. I thought you wouldn't notice right away, she admits. I let that sit. I noticed, I say. Her shoulders slump. The word is quiet, bare. I don't respond right away. Outside, a car passes. Somewhere down the block, a door slams. Life continues at a distance. I didn't want to scream, I say finally. I didn't want to accuse you. She frowns. The absence, I say. She looks around the room, as if seeing it differently now. The lamp she bought me years ago, the rug worn thin near the doorway, the chair I'm sitting in. I didn't think of it like that, she says. I know, I repeat. Her voice wavers. I meet her gaze. I tried. She nods slowly, absorbing that. She asks after a moment. Safe, I say. Nothing wasted. She exhales, a long breath. That word holds more than agreement. It holds acceptance. We sit there in silence, the kind that doesn't scrape. I didn't mean to take from you, she says softly. I stand then, slowly. My knees protest, as they always do. I know, I say. She looks up at me, eyes glossy but steady. I consider that. Then start by asking, I say. She nods, once, firm. She asks. Yes, I say. I almost smile. I move toward the kitchen. She follows, quieter now, steps measured. The fridge hums as I open it, light spilling out onto the tile, still empty, still honest. This is what I saw, I say. She stands beside me, not touching anything, just looking. I didn't realize how much you depended on it, she says. I close the door gently. That lands. She nods, eyes down. We stand there together, not touching, not apart. For the first time in a long while, the house doesn't feel like it's holding its breath. As I reach for the cupboard to pour us water, I wonder if this quiet moment, this pause, is the beginning of something different, or just the first time she's truly heard me speak. The kettle clicks off by itself. I don't reach for it right away. I let the steam thin out, let the kitchen settle into its quiet hum. Evening light presses against the window, pale and tired, stretching across the table like it's unsure where to stop. She's already sitting down. Not slouched, not defensive, just still. 2 chairs, a table that's seen birthdays, bills, homework, arguments that never quite became arguments. Tonight, the space between us feels wider than the table itself. I take my seat slowly. The chair creaks. It always has. Tonight, it sounds like it remembers more than I want it to. For a moment, neither of us speaks. I watch her hands rest on the table, fingers curled slightly inward. No phone, no distraction. That feels new. I clear my throat, then stop. Don't rush it. She looks up, doesn't interrupt. That money, I continue, wasn't for trips or treats. I pause. Her brow tightens just a little. I'm not talking about comfort, I say. I'm talking about safety. She nods once, uncertain. I know you think I live simply because I want to, I say. The kitchen feels colder. Or maybe I'm just noticing it now. That account, I go on, was for medicine if I needed it, for the roof if it leaked. She shifts in her chair. I wasn't trying to take that from you, she says quickly. Too quickly. I know, I reply. The words stop her. She wasn't expecting agreement. But intent doesn't change impact, I add. She opens her mouth, ready to explain. I can see the explanation lining up behind her eyes. Expenses, timing, stress. How everything adds up faster than you expect. Then she closes her mouth again. Her gaze drops to the table. I didn't think about it like that, she admits. I know, I say, softer now. The clock on the wall ticks. Each second feels deliberate. She lets out a small, breathless laugh. I was proud of that, I say. Not the fear. She swallows. Her fingers press into the wood. I didn't mean to assume, she says. Things were tight. I look at her then. Really look. Later is a dangerous word, I say. It makes everything feel temporary. She flinches at that. Not dramatically, just enough to notice. I didn't think you'd feel unsafe, she says quietly. That's because I didn't tell you, I reply. The silence that follows is heavier than the one before. I don't need luxury, I say after a moment. Her eyes lift, startled. I know you believe that, I say. She exhales slowly, like she's letting go of something she's been holding too tight. I was angry when I opened the fridge, she says. I wasn't, I reply. She nods. Her shoulders slump. That almost makes me smile. Almost. I kept telling myself I'd talk to you when you got back, she says. I didn't want to shout, I say. She looks up. I consider the question carefully. Someone who forgot to ask, I say. Her eyes shine, but she doesn't cry. She never liked crying in front of me. I should have apologized right away, she says. Yes, I reply. The word isn't sharp, it's steady. I think I was ashamed, she admits. I nod. Regret can arrive before apology. She presses her lips together. I'm sorry, she says. This time the words land differently. Not rushed, not defensive. I breathe out. The room seems to do the same. I can pay it back, she says quickly. Not all at once, but... We'll talk about that, I interrupt gently. She waits. It's about permission, I say, and trust. She nods, eyes steady now. I study her face, the familiar angles, the person I've known longer than I've known myself as anything other than her mother. Then don't, I say. Simple, unforgiving, honest. The kettle has gone cold now. I stand and pour the water anyway. The sound fills the space between us, gives us both something to listen to. I didn't realize how much you were carrying quietly, she says. I didn't realize how quiet I'd become, I reply. We sit there, cups between us, steam barely rising. I don't want us to lose this, she says, gesturing vaguely at the table, the room, us. We won't, I say. She nods. Outside, the sky darkens another shade. The house settles into its evening sounds, the refrigerator humming, the floor ticking as it cools. I'm glad you told me, she says. I'm glad you listened, I reply. We sit in that for a while. Not fixed, not broken, just present. As I lift my cup, I wonder whether this is the moment things begin to change, or simply the first time we've named what was already shifting. Either way, the space between us feels smaller now. Not gone, but finally visible. The house is quiet in the way it gets just before night fully settles. Not asleep, just listening. The light over the kitchen sink hums faintly, a tired sound, like it's been working longer than it was meant to. I stand there longer than necessary, watching my reflection blur in the glass. My face looks the same. That's what surprises me. I expected something to look different after everything. Older, sharper, thinner. But the changes have stayed inside. When I turn back toward the table, she's still there, waiting. Her shoulders have lowered since we sat down. Not relaxed, just no longer braced for impact. Her voice, when she speaks again, is softer than before. Careful. Like she's stepping onto a floor she's not sure will hold her weight. "I didn't think you'd notice so soon," she says. She doesn't look at me when she says it. "I thought you check things monthly." The words land slowly, each one heavier than the last. "And I didn't think you'd check at all," she adds, almost apologetic. That's the part that stings, not the money, not the number missing from the account, but the quiet certainty behind her words that my trust had become invisible. I sit back in my chair, the wood presses against my spine in a familiar way. This chair has always been here, through birthdays, through arguments, through long nights when I waited for her to come home, listening for the sound of her keys like it was proof the world was still working. "I did trust you," I say. She nods, still not meeting my eyes. "I didn't think you'd be hurt," she says. I let that sit between us. "I understand why you did it," I say finally. She presses her lips together, thinking. "I told myself it wasn't really taking," she says. "I knew I'd pay it back." Her fingers trace a small circle on the table, the same spot, over and over. "I didn't think it would feel like this," she admits. I ask. She hesitates. "I don't know," she says. "Normal." I nod slowly. She finally looks up at me then. "That money wasn't untouched," I continue. "The clock ticks, loud in the silence." "I didn't think you needed it right now," she says. "That's because I don't live loudly," I reply. Her eyes flicker. Guilt, maybe, or recognition. "I didn't think you'd notice so soon," she repeats, almost to herself. I ask. She doesn't answer. That's answer enough. "I want to pay you back," she says quickly. "I can transfer it this week or next." I study her face, the way her brow creases when she's worried. The small scar near her eyebrow from when she fell off her bike as a child and cried harder from embarrassment than pain. "Repayment isn't the point anymore," I say. She looks confused. I breathe in slowly. The air smells faintly of tea and old wood. "Money can be returned," I say. She swallows. "I know," I say. She sits back, folding her arms, not defensively, but like she's cold. "I thought we were past needing permission," she says. "We are close," I say. She frowns. "I didn't want to feel like a child again," she admits. "And I didn't want to feel invisible," I reply. The words hang there. Not sharp, just honest. She asks quietly. I look around the kitchen, at the worn counter edge, the chipped mug I never throw away, the small dent in the wall from when we moved the table years ago and laughed about it later. "Probably when we stopped talking about them," I say. She nods slowly. "I didn't think you'd be checking," she says again. I thought, I don't know. "Comfort isn't the same as safety," I reply. "Comfort is what people see." She lets out a shaky breath. "I didn't think about you being afraid," she says. "I didn't want you to," I say. Her eyes fill, but she blinks it back. She's always been like that, holding herself together even when she shouldn't have to. "I'm sorry," she says again. This time, the apology feels heavier, like it's carrying more than just words. "I believe you," I say. She looks surprised by that. She asks, I think for a moment. "Because apology is a beginning," I say. She nods. "I can give the money back," she says softly. I look at her then, really look. "Neither do I admit. The honesty of it settles us both. Outside, a car passes. Headlights sweep briefly across the wall, then disappear. The house exhales. "I don't want us to keep score," she says. "Neither do I reply. She sits with that. She asks. I reach for my cup. The tea has gone lukewarm. I drink it anyway. "We slow down," I say. "We talk before we decide." She nods, eyes steady now. "I didn't think you'd notice," she says one last time. "I noticed," I reply. We sit there for a while after that, not fixed, not broken beyond repair, just quieter, more careful. As the light outside fades completely, I wonder if trust comes back all at once, or in small, ordinary moments, like noticing who checks and who assumes they don't have to. I don't know yet. But I do know this. Some things can be returned. Others have to be rebuilt. Slowly. by hand. The fridge light comes on with a small click, the kind you barely notice unless you're paying attention. I stand there in my slippers, holding a carton of milk, listening to the house breathe around me. The night has settled fully now. No raised voices, no footsteps pacing, just the hum of appliances doing what they were built to do. I place the milk on the shelf slowly, then the leftovers, then the vegetables wrapped carefully in paper, still smelling faintly of earth. Each item returns to its place like a promise being tested. The fridge door closes with a soft seal. The sound is familiar again, ordinary. But the quiet that follows is different. It doesn't feel empty anymore. It feels considered. I rest my hand on the door a moment longer than necessary. The metal is cool, steady. It doesn't judge. It just holds what you put inside. That night, the house sounds normal again, but I don't. I don't sleep much. Not because I'm restless, because I'm alert. Every small sound registers. The floor settling, a pipe knocking somewhere behind the walls, her door opening then closing, footsteps moving carefully, as if the house itself might overhear her. I lie there, staring at the ceiling, tracing the faint crack that's been there for years. I remember when we first noticed it. We joked about it being a map of somewhere we'd never go. I think about how many things I've learned to live around instead of fixing. When morning comes, it arrives gently. Pale light slips through the curtains, landing on the edge of the bed. The house stretches awake. I hear her moving in the kitchen, quiet, efficient, no music, no phone calls, just drawers opening, closing. I make tea and sit at the table. The same chair, the same mug. Steam rises, then fades. She comes in without looking at me at first. Her coat is already on. Her bag rests by the door, smaller than before. This isn't a trip. There are no excited plans packed inside it, just space. I'll be gone for a bit, she says. Not defensive, not apologetic, just factual. I nod. She hesitates like she wants to say more. Her mouth opens, then closes again. I'll call, she adds. I know, I reply. She looks at me then, really looks. Her eyes search my face, maybe for permission, maybe for forgiveness, maybe for something else neither of us has words for yet. I didn't mean for things to get like this, she says quietly. I know, I answer. It's the truth. And it's not enough to fix anything, but it's honest. She steps toward the door, pauses, then turns back. Thank you, she says. I ask. For telling me, she replies. She leaves without another word. The door closes softly behind her. No slam, no finality, just the sound of a latch catching. The house absorbs it. I stay at the table long after she's gone. My tea cools again, untouched. The chair across from me is empty. It looks the same as it always has, but now it feels intentional, chosen, not avoided. I think about boundaries, how people talk about them like fences you build overnight, strong and obvious. But mine were always chalk lines on the ground, easy to step over, easy to erase. I think about all the times I stayed quiet because it felt kinder. All the times I told myself love meant flexibility. All the times I mistook endurance for generosity. The house is quiet, but not tense anymore. The floors creak when I stand, the way they always have, like they remember me. I walk from room to room slowly, touch the back of the couch, straighten a picture frame that doesn't really need it. These small acts ground me, remind me where I am. In the kitchen, the fridge hums steadily, full again, functional, ordinary. I open it once more, just to look. Everything is there, nothing missing, but I know better now than to confuse presence with security. I close the door gently. Later, sunlight moves across the floor, reaching the place where I like to sit in the afternoon, the honest place. I lower myself into the chair and watch the dust float in the light, each particle visible for a moment before disappearing again. I think about how long it took me to speak, how many signs I noticed but explained away, how often I told myself, this is just how things change. Some lessons cost more than money. They cost timing, they cost comfort, They cost the illusion that love alone keeps things balanced. I wonder if I waited too long, not too long to fix things, but too long to prevent them from needing repair at all. The house doesn't answer. It never does. It only holds what happens inside it. I sip my tea. It's still warm this time. Outside, the day continues. Neighbors pass. A dog barks somewhere down the street. Life goes on, indifferent and persistent. I sit there, breathing, thinking about what it means to be seen. About how boundaries aren't walls meant to keep people out. They're lines that show where you stand. And for the first time in a while, I feel like I know where that is. Still, a question lingers, quiet but insistent. Some lessons arrive late, some arrive exactly when they must. I don't know yet which kind this one is. But as the light shifts and the house settles around me, I wonder, now that I've finally spoken, will it be enough to change what matters most? Or only enough to keep me from losing myself again?